This is the 3D VIEW-MASTER Fairy Tale Puss in Boots. VIEW-MASTER Reel 1, Picture 1. Long ago there was a miller who, when he died, left to his 3 sons no more than his mill, his donkey and his cat. The division was soon made. There was no need for a lawyer or a judge for such a small inheritance, so none was called in to settle it. The oldest son took the mill, the second the donkey, but the youngest son was left with only the cat. Picture 2. The youngest son was quite unhappy at having so little. He listened while his brothers shook hands and talked of what they intended to do with their inheritance. His own future looked bleak. What living could a fellow make with only a cat? My brothers, the young fellow sighed as he sat holding his head in his hands, may live quite handsomely if they go into partnership. But for my part, when I have eaten my cat and made a muff from his skin, I must die of hunger. Picture 3. The cat, who had heard all this, pretended that he had not. He walked in a sedate and dignified manner to his master, and with a grave and serious air he said, "Do not grieve, good master. You need not trouble yourself. Just give me a bag and a pair of hunting boots." "Hunting boots?" his master interrupted. "Yes," Puss answered. "The kind a gentleman would wear for a shell hunt through the bramble fields where they do. You shall see that you did not do so badly by inheriting me. In fact, you might learn you have fought better than your brothers." The miller's son did not build much hope on what the cat had said. However, he had often seen this cat use cunning tricks to catch rats and mice, such as hiding in a meal sack, playing dead, and even hanging by his heels to drop upon them suddenly. So he did not altogether despair of the cat's ability to help him out of his situation. Picture 4. Puss got what he asked it for, handsome boots of the softest red leather. He proudly stroked their velvety texture and tried them on. He strutted about for a time until he could walk as though he had always been accustomed to such finery. Then he put a bag about his neck, holding the strings of it in his 2 forepaws. Thus outfitted, Puss strode into the game field where there was an abundance of rabbits. Picture 5. He put fresh, tender carrots into the bag and stretched himself out full length. Lying as if dead, he waited for some young rabbits who were not yet wise to worldly dangers to come and rummage through the bag. Soon a rash and foolish young rabbit jumped into the bag, and Monsieur Puss immediately pulled the drawstrings tight. Proud of his prey, Puss went with it straight to the royal palace, where he asked to speak to the king. Picture 6. Puss was shown upstairs to the king's apartment, and making a low bow said to him, "I have brought you, sir, a rabbit of the game field, which my noble lord, the master of Carabas, has commanded me to present to your majesty." Now Puss Master was never lord of anything. This title the cat found convenient to bestow upon him at this time to suit his project. Plans for his project well in mind, Puss again went hunting and hid himself in a large wheat field. He had prepared the bag in somewhat the same manner as he had for the rabbits. When a brace of partridges ran into it, Puss quickly drew the strings tight and caught them both. Again he went to the palace and made a present of his catch to the king, who welcomed him most kindly. He expressed his pleasure by serving Puss refreshments in the palace garden. Puss continued hunting for 2 or 3 months and taking the game to his majesty. Each time he said the present was from his master, the Lord of Carabas. Proudly he wore his red boots. Picture 7. The king was greatly impressed with this special attention from one of his subjects. He ordered that Puss be fed the finest food he had in his kitchen. This development gave the cat a great deal of freedom to roam about the palace. He listened to many conversations, although seeming not to, and became familiar with the thoughts of the members of the royal household. VIEW-MASTER Reel 2, Picture 8. One day, Puss overheard the king and his daughter, who was the most beautiful princess in the world, planning a carriage ride along the riverside. Puss was overjoyed, for this trip fit into his plan perfectly. Hurrying to his master, he said, "If you will follow my advice, your fortune is made." Puss' master, who was more dejected than ever, since many months had passed and nothing seemed to have come from the cat's idea, responded with only a disinterested wave of his hand. "You need to do nothing," Puss coaxed, "but bathe yourself in the river. For that part I will show you what to do. Then you leave the rest to me. I'll take care of it." Picture 9. "How can bathing in the river change my ill fortune?" his master asked. "I have bathed in it many times, yet things remain the same." The Marquis of Carabas, as Puss had titled the miller's son, did what he was advised to do without knowing or caring why or wherefore. While he was bathing, the king passed by with the beautiful princess in the royal coach. The cat began to cry out, "Help! Help! My lord! The Marquis of Carabas is going to be drowned." Picture 10. The king put his head out of the coach window, and upon seeing that it was the cat who had brought him so much game, he ordered his guards to go immediately and assist his lordship, the Marquis of Carabas. Meanwhile, Puss came to the coach window and told the king that rogues had made off with his master's clothing. They had done this, he explained, while the master had cried, "Thieves! Thieves!" While his master's attention had been directed elsewhere, this cunning cat had stuffed his clothing out of sight under a huge stone. Picture 11. This unfortunate condition makes it impossible for him to greet you, although he greatly desires it, Puss said. Whereupon the king ordered apparel fetched for the Lord of Carabas. Meanwhile, Puss had kept his master in the background. When the clothiers arrived, they waited upon the Marquis in a way he had never dreamed of. Picture 12. The miller's son was well built and quite handsome. Dressed in the king's finery, he looked as if he had always been a marquis. When he was presented to the king, the princess cast several secret glances his direction. Picture 13. Now Puss, slyly watched these proceedings, was overjoyed. He then marched far ahead to where some peasants were mowing hay in a meadow. "Good people," he said, "if you don't tell the king this meadow belongs to the Marquis of Carabas, you will be chopped into mincemeat." Picture 14. When the king passed by, he asked to whom the meadow belonged, and the fearful people said, "The Marquis of Carabas." Puss kept ahead and told all he found working in the fields to tell the king the fields belonged to the Marquis, which they did. The king was astonished at the vast holdings of the Marquis, but no more so than his lordship, who, nevertheless, did not show by look or word that he had known nothing of it before this. VIEW-MASTER Reel 3, Picture 15. At last Monsieur Puss came to a stately castle. The master was an ogre, who was very rich, owning the lands the king had just gone over. When the guard came to the door, Puss told him he could not pass without paying his respects to his illustrious master, whose magic powers were known all over the world. Picture 16. Flattered, the ogre invited Puss in. "Thank you, sir," Puss said politely. "But first satisfy my curiosity. I have heard in far lands how you can change into all sorts of creatures, such as an elephant or a lion. May I have the pleasure of seeing you do this?" "What you have heard is true," the ogre answered brusquely. "Now watch closely." Puss did, not able to take his eyes away as the ogre's figure faded and the lion's appeared. Picture 17. And suddenly there was no ogre. A lion stood in his place. Puss was terrified and leaped to the gutter above, where he had some difficulty standing up in his boots. Picture 18. The ogre quickly resumed his natural form, laughing roughly at Puss's terror. "Sir," Puss said shakily, "perhaps it is easier to change into a large animal. I find it hard to believe it is possible for a large man to change into something smaller, say a mouse or rat." Picture 19. "Something smaller? Not at all," the ogre boasted. "You shall see." The next instant he was a mouse, running tauntingly close to Puss. Which was the opportunity the cat wanted, so he grabbed him and gobbled him up forthwith. Picture 20. By this time the king had neared the ogre's castle, and seeing its grandeur, wished to enter. Puss ran to the gate and cried, "Welcome to the castle of my lord the Marquis of Carabas." "This is yours, Marquis?" the king asked. "In all my kingdom there is nothing more magnificent." The Marquis was busy helping the princess to alight. They were now madly in love, having cast glances at each other all along the ride, which the king saw but pretended he did not. Picture 21. Hand in hand, the Marquis and the Princess followed the king into the dining hall, where they found a great feast that had been prepared for the ogre and his friends. Cheered by wine and impressed by the Marquis' possessions, the king said, "It rests with you, your lordship, whether you will be my son-in-law." The Marquis bowed acceptance, and the Princess' eyes declared agreement. They were married next day in the ogre's castle and took possession of it. Puss hung up his boots to become a great lord, never again to chase mice except for amusement.